The dust-laden wind howled across the barren plains of Wyoming Territory in 1876, carrying with it the desperate prayers of Victoria Maxwell as she stumbled forward, one agonizing step after another. Her once fine dress hung in tatters around her slight frame, and blood from countless scrapes mingled with the dirt that caked her skin. 3 days without proper water, 2 weeks on the run, and now her strength was finally failing her. Victoria had never imagined herself here alone in the wilderness, after escaping the clutches of notorious outlaw Jed Harris, who had ambushed the stagecoach carrying her to her uncle's ranch in Laramie. The driver and guard had been killed instantly. Victoria had managed to slip away during the chaos that followed, running blindly into the vast emptiness of the frontier. Now, as the merciless afternoon sun beat down upon her blistered shoulders, Victoria's vision began to blur. The horizon wavered like heat rising from sun-baked stone. Her parched lips cracked further as she attempted to wet them with a tongue equally dry. The small canteen she'd managed to grab during her escape had been empty for a day already. Just a little further, she whispered to herself, though to what destination she couldn't say. Her auburn hair, once elegantly pinned, now hung in wild tangles around her face, offering scant protection from the relentless sun. When Victoria's knees finally buckled beneath her, she barely felt the impact of the hard earth against her body. The world spun in dizzying circles as she tried to push herself back to her feet, driven by the primal instinct to keep moving, to survive. That's when she heard it, the rhythmic pounding of hoofbeats cutting through her haze of exhaustion. Fear surged through her veins. Had Harris and his men found her? Would death come now, after she had fought so hard to live? With trembling arms, Victoria tried once more to stand, to run, to hide anything, to escape what was surely her doom. "Whoa there, thunder!" A deep voice called out, followed by the soft nickering of a horse brought to a stop. Victoria struggled to focus her gaze on the approaching figure. The silhouette of a man atop a powerful black stallion materialized against the setting sun. Her heart hammered in her chest as she made one final desperate attempt to rise. Her body trembled from exhaustion. The cowboy said, "You don't have to stand. You've already survived." His voice was surprisingly gentle, at odds with his rugged appearance as he dismounted in a fluid motion and approached cautiously, as if she were a wounded animal that might bolt. Victoria could now make out a strong, featured face beneath the wide brim of his hat, concerned blue eyes studying her with a mixture of wariness and compassion. "Name's Wade Blackburn, madam. Looks like you've had yourself quite a journey." He knelt beside her, keeping a respectful distance while offering his canteen. "Small sips only. Too much too fast will make you sick." Victoria's hand shook violently as she reached for the water, and the cowboy Wade steadied it for her, helping guide it to her lips. The first cool drop on her tongue nearly made her weep with relief. Thank you," she managed, her voice a raspy whisper. "Can you tell me your name, madam, and how you came to be out here all alone?" Wade asked, his eyes scanning the horizon with the practiced vigilance of a man accustomed to danger. "Victoria Maxwell," she replied, forcing each syllable past her parched throat. "Stagecoach. Ambushed. Men with guns. A man named Harris." Wade's expression darkened immediately. "Jed Harris." "You escaped from Jed Harris?" The disbelief in his voice was evident. Victoria nodded weakly, the simple movement requiring far more energy than it should. "Well, Miss Maxwell, you're either the bravest or the luckiest woman in the Wyoming Territory," he said with newfound respect. "My ranch is about 2 hours' ride from here. Can you hold on that long if I get you up on Thunder?" The thought of staying conscious for 2 more hours seemed impossible, but the alternative was certain death in the wilderness. Victoria managed a small nod. Wade's strong arms carefully gathered her up, and she was too exhausted to feel embarrassed by the intimate contact. He placed her atop his horse with surprising gentleness, then mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist as he took the reins in his other hand. "Lean back against me if you need to, Miss Maxwell. I won't let you fall." As thunder began to move across the vast expanse of Wyoming wilderness, Victoria found herself surrendering to the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid presence of the cowboy behind her. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope that she might actually survive. Wade felt the exact moment Victoria lost consciousness, her body becoming a deadweight against his chest. He adjusted his hold on her, checking to make sure she was still breathing. Her pulse was weak, but steady beneath his fingers. How this city woman had survived the wilderness for what appeared to be days was nothing short of miraculous. He urged Thunder to a faster pace, mindful of his precious cargo. Jed Harris was not a man known for letting anyone escape his clutches, let alone a woman. If Harris and his gang were searching for her, time was of the essence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie, Wade finally caught sight of the wooden arch marking the entrance to the Double B Ranch. Relief washed over him at the sight of the sprawling ranch house in the distance, smoke curling from the chimney into the darkening sky. "Almost there," he murmured, more to himself than to his unconscious companion. The ranch hands noticed his approach, several of them abandoning their evening chores to meet him as he rode into the yard. Their curious expressions quickly turned to concern when they spotted the woman cradled against Wade's chest. "Frank, ride for Doc Peterson," Wade called out to his foreman as he carefully dismounted, lifting Victoria's limp form in his arms. "Tell him it's urgent." "Right away, boss," Frank replied, already heading toward the stables. "What happened? Who is she?" asked Elijah, the youngest of Wade's ranch hands, eyes wide with concern. "Her name's Victoria Maxwell. Found her collapsed out near Rattlesnake Ridge," Wade explained as he carried her toward the house. "Says she escaped from Jed Harris after a stagecoach robbery." The name sent a ripple of tension through the gathered men. Harris's reputation for brutality was well known throughout the territory. "Martha," Wade called as he entered the house, heading straight for the spare bedroom. "I need you." Martha Jenkins, the middle-aged housekeeper who had helped raise Wade after his mother's death, appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of the unconscious woman in Wade's arms. "Land's sake, what happened to this poor child?" "She's been on the run for days, I reckon. Needs cleaning up and tending to. I've sent for the doctor," Wade explained, gently placing Victoria on the bed. Martha shooed him from the room, already rolling up her sleeves. "Out with you then. I'll take care of her." Wade hesitated, strangely reluctant to leave Victoria's side. There was something about her courage, her determination to survive against impossible odds, that had touched something deep inside him. "She'll be in good hands," Martha assured him, her voice softening. "Now go get yourself cleaned up for supper. You look like you've been wrestling dust devils all day." With a nod, Wade retreated from the room, pausing at the door for one last glance at Victoria's pale face against the white pillow before forcing himself to walk away. Outside, he issued orders to his men double the night watch. Keep an eye out for any sign of Harris or his gang. If the outlaw was indeed searching for Victoria, Wade needed to be prepared. The Double B Ranch had never been attacked before Wade's reputation as a marksman and former U.S. Marshal usually deterred troublemakers, but Harris was just reckless enough to try. By the time Doc Peterson arrived, Victoria had been bathed and dressed in one of Martha's nightgowns. The doctor examined her thoroughly, confirming what Wade had already suspected: severe dehydration, exhaustion, and numerous minor injuries, but nothing life-threatening. "She's stronger than she looks," Doc Peterson remarked as he packed up his medical bag. "Most folks wouldn't have lasted half as long out there. Keep her hydrated, fed with broths and soft foods at first, and let her rest. She should recover fully with time." "And her memories?" Wade asked, thinking of the trauma she must have endured. The doctor's expression turned grim. "Those might take longer to heal if they ever do. Jed Harris isn't known for his gentle treatment of captives, especially women." Wade's jaw tightened, a surge of protective anger rushing through him. "I'll keep her safe." "I've no doubt," Doc Peterson replied, studying Wade's face with interest. "Just remember, she's been through hell. Might be skittish as a newborn colt for a while." After seeing the doctor out, Wade returned to Victoria's bedside. Martha had pulled a chair beside the bed and was gently dabbing Victoria's forehead with a cool cloth. "Any change?" Wade asked quietly. Martha shook her head, still sleeping soundly, poor thing's exhausted to the bone. "I'll sit with her," Wade offered. "You should get some rest yourself." Martha gave him a knowing look. "Been a long time since you've shown such concern for a stranger, Wade Blackburn." "She survived Jed Harris," he replied simply. "Showed more grit than most men I know." With a gentle pat on his shoulder, Martha left him alone with Victoria. Wade settled into the chair, studying the woman's face in the soft lamplight. Even battered and bruised, there was a quiet dignity about her, a delicate strength in the curve of her jaw and the arch of her brows. He wondered about her life before this ordeal, what had brought her to Wyoming, where she had come from, who was waiting for her somewhere. The questions would have to wait until she awoke, but in the meantime, Wade made a silent promise to himself and to her. She would be safe here. As night deepened around the ranch house, Wade remained vigilant, dividing his attention between the vulnerable woman on the bed and the darkened window that looked out onto the vast Wyoming night, where danger might be lurking. Victoria's dreams were a chaotic jumble of terrifying memories and disjointed images: the crack of gunfire, the jolt of the stagecoach coming to a sudden halt, rough hands grabbing her arms, days of desperate flight across unforgiving terrain. In her dreams, she was still running, always running, with the sound of pursuit close behind. When consciousness finally returned, it came slowly, like dawn breaking over the plains. First, there was the sensation of softness beneath her, a real bed, not the hard ground she had grown accustomed to. Then, the awareness of clean fabric against her skin, the scent of lavender and soap replacing the acrid smell of fear and dirt. Victoria's eyelids fluttered open to an unfamiliar ceiling. Panic surged through her veins before memory returned: the cowboy, the water, the promise of safety. She turned her head slightly and found him there, slumped in a chair beside her bed, his hat tipped forward over his eyes as he dozed. Wade Blackburn. That was his name. The man who had found her when all hope seemed lost. As if sensing her gaze, Wade stirred, pushing his hat back and straightening in his chair. Their eyes met, and Victoria felt an unexpected flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "Welcome back," he said softly, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. "How are you feeling?" Victoria took mental inventory of her body, the aches and pains, the lingering weakness, but also the blessed relief of being clean, hydrated, and safe. "Better," she managed, her voice still rough. "Thank you." Wade reached for a glass of water on the bedside table, helping her sit up slightly to drink. His hands were calloused but gentle, his movements careful and respectful. "You've been asleep for nearly 18 hours, he informed her. Doc Peterson came by and tended to you. Said you'll be just fine with some rest and proper food." Victoria handed the glass back, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance and the situation. "I don't know how to repay your kindness, Mr. Blackburn." A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Wade, please. And there's no debt to repay. Couldn't very well leave you out there to die." His straightforwardness was oddly comforting. Victoria attempted to push herself into a more dignified sitting position, but her arms trembled with the effort. "Easy now," Wade cautioned, adjusting the pillows behind her back. "No need to rush things. You're safe here." The simple statement brought unexpected tears to Victoria's eyes. Safe? How long had it been since she had truly felt safe? "Harris," she whispered, the name like poison on her tongue. "He'll be looking for me." Wade's expression hardened, the gentle cowboy momentarily replaced by something fiercer, more dangerous. "Let him try. The Double B is well defended, and I've got men watching the approaches. No one's getting to you here." The conviction in his voice soothed her frayed nerves somewhat, but the trauma of the past weeks wasn't so easily dispelled. "I need to reach my uncle in Laramie," Victoria said, suddenly remembering her original destination. "He'll be worried sick when the stagecoach doesn't arrive." "We'll send word as soon as you're strong enough to write a letter," Wade assured her. "For now, your only job is to recover." The door opened, and an older woman entered, carrying a tray that held a steaming bowl and a cup of tea. Her weathered face broke into a warm smile when she saw Victoria awake. "There she is. Thought I heard voices. I'm Martha Jenkins, dear housekeeper here at the Double B." She set the tray down and immediately began fussing with Victoria's blankets. "Brought you some chicken broth and willow bark tea. Best start with something gentle on your stomach." Victoria smiled gratefully at the motherly woman. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. Just Martha, honey. Everyone here calls me Martha." She shot Wade a pointed look. "And this one's been like a bear with a sore paw, refusing to leave your side except when propriety demanded it." Wade cleared his throat, a hint of color rising in his tanned cheeks. "Thought someone should keep watch is all." Martha made a sound that was half laugh, half snort. "He sat there all night with his rifle across his knees, like Jed Harris himself might come bursting through the window at any moment." Victoria's gaze met Wade's, a silent understanding passing between them. He had protected her, this stranger, with the same fierce dedication he might show to family. "I'm in your debt," she said softly. Wade stood, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I'll let you eat in peace. Got ranch business to tend to anyway." He strode from the room, his spurs jingling softly with each step. Martha watched him go with a knowing smile before turning back to Victoria. "First time I've seen that man flustered in years," she remarked, helping Victoria with the soup. "Now, when you're feeling up to it, I've laid out some clothes that should fit you well enough until we can see about getting your things." Victoria's face fell. "I have nothing. Everything I owned was on that stagecoach." Martha patted her hand. "Don't you worry about that now. We'll make do." Wade's sister left some dresses behind when she married and moved to Denver. They might need taking in a bit, but they'll serve. As Victoria sipped the nourishing broth, her mind filled with questions about the enigmatic cowboy who had saved her life. "How long has Mr. Blackburn Wade owned this ranch?" "Going on 8 years now," Martha replied, settling into the chair Wade had vacated. "Bought it after he hung up his U.S. Marshal's badge. Built it into one of the finest cattle operations in the territory." "He was a marshal?" Victoria asked, surprised though it explained the competent confidence he exuded. Martha nodded. "One of the best. Tracked down some of the worst outlaws in the West. Jed Harris would know his name. They've crossed paths before, though Harris always managed to slip away." This new information cast Wade in an even more intriguing light. Not just a cowboy, but a former lawman with a personal connection to the very outlaw Victoria had escaped from. Why did he leave that life behind? She asked, curiosity getting the better of her. Martha's expression softened with old sadness. Lost his partner in a shootout. Blamed himself, though everyone said there was nothing he could have done. After that, he decided he'd had enough of chasing bad men and watching good ones die. Victoria processed this as she finished her broth, feeling strength gradually returning to her limbs. The man who had rescued her carried his own burdens, his own scars. "Rest now," Martha said, taking the empty bowl. "There'll be plenty of time for questions later. You're not going anywhere until you're fully recovered, and that's a fact." As Martha left with the tray, Victoria settled back against the pillows, her mind still turning over everything she'd learned about Wade Blackburn. Outside the window, she could hear the sounds of the working ranch men calling to each other, the lowing of cattle, the rhythmic pounding of a hammer. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, so at odds with the terror she had lived through. For the first time in weeks, Victoria allowed herself to truly relax, secure in the knowledge that, at least for now, she was safe. 3 days passed before Victoria was strong enough to leave her bed for more than brief periods. Wade had been a constant but respectful presence, checking on her several times daily but never intruding. Martha had been her primary caregiver, bringing meals, helping her bathe, and providing companionship during the long hours of recovery. On the 4th morning, Victoria awoke feeling truly rested for the first time. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting golden patterns on the wooden floor. She rose carefully, pleased to find her legs steady beneath her. The dress Martha had laid out the previous evening, a simple blue calico with white trim, fit reasonably well after Martha's hasty alterations. After dressing herself and arranging her hair as best she could with a borrowed brush, Victoria made her way cautiously toward the sound of voices and the enticing smell of coffee and bacon. The kitchen was warm and inviting, with Martha bustling around the large cast-iron stove while Wade sat at the table reading a newspaper. Both looked up in surprise when Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Well, look at you," Martha exclaimed approvingly. "Standing on your own 2 feet and looking more like yourself." Wade had risen immediately, setting aside his paper and pulling out a chair for her. "Good morning, Miss Maxwell. It's good to see you up and about." "Thank you," Victoria replied, taking the offered seat. "I was tired of being an invalid." "You've made a remarkable recovery," Wade commented, reclaiming his own chair. "Doc Peterson will be impressed when he stops by today." Martha placed a cup of coffee before Victoria, followed by a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "Eat up now. You need to put some meat back on those bones." The normalcy of the moment sitting at a kitchen table, sharing a meal brought an unexpected lump to Victoria's throat. Such simple things had seemed impossibly distant during her desperate flight through the wilderness. "I sent a telegram to your uncle in Laramie yesterday," Wade informed her as they ate. "Got a reply this morning. He's mighty relieved to hear you're safe and says to take all the time you need to recover before traveling." Victoria's eyes widened in surprise. "You didn't need to do that." "Seemed like the right thing to do," Wade replied simply. "He wanted to come fetch you himself, but I assured him you were in good hands here until you're strong enough for the journey." "Thank you," Victoria said softly, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Uncle William is my only family since my parents passed. He must have been frantic when I didn't arrive." "He was," Wade confirmed. "Had already organized a search party and contacted the territorial marshal's office." The mention of marshals brought to mind what Martha had told her about Wade's former profession. Victoria studied him across the table, trying to reconcile the quiet rancher before her with the lawman he had once been. As if reading her thoughts, Wade met her gaze steadily. "Martha's been telling tales, I reckon." Martha sniffed indignantly as she joined them at the table with her own plate. "Wasn't tales, just truth the girl has a right to know considering her situation." Wade sighed, but there was no real annoyance in it. "Fair enough." "Yes, Miss Maxwell, I used to be a U.S. Marshal before I bought this place." "And you've encountered Jed Harris before?" Victoria asked directly. A shadow crossed Wade's features. "3 times, never managed to bring him in. Man slippery as an eel and twice as poisonous." "Is that why you helped me?" "Because of your history with Harris." Wade considered this, taking a sip of his coffee before answering. "Would have helped any soul I found in your condition, Harris connection or not, but knowing you'd escaped from him." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Let's just say it gave me extra motivation to ensure you stayed safe." The protectiveness in his voice sent a warm flutter through Victoria's chest. Martha watched their exchange with barely concealed interest, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. After breakfast, Wade offered to show Victoria around the ranch if she felt up to it. The doctor was due to arrive until later that afternoon, and Wade thought some fresh air might do her good. "I'd like that very much," Victoria accepted, eager to see more of the place that had become her temporary sanctuary. Wade helped her into a borrowed shawl, his hands lingering briefly at her shoulders in a touch so gentle it might have been imagined. Outside, the spring air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of grass and livestock and open spaces. After the confines of her sict, it felt gloriously liberating. The Double B Ranch spread out before them in a well-ordered expanse of corrals, barns, bunkhouses, and outbuildings. Men tipped their hats respectfully as Wade led Victoria on a leisurely tour, introducing her to those they encountered: Frank, the gruff foreman with kind eyes; young Elijah, barely 20 and eager to please; Cook, who refused to answer to any other name and growled a greeting from the doorway of the bunkhouse. "How many men do you employ?" Victoria asked, impressed by the operation scale. 22 full-time, more during spring roundup and branding season," Wade replied. "Good men, all of them. Loyal." They paused at the corral fence where several horses grazed, including the magnificent black stallion that had carried them both to safety. "There's Thunder," Wade said with obvious affection. "Best horse I've ever owned." Victoria approached the fence, and the stallion lifted his head, regarding her with intelligent eyes before ambling over to investigate. She extended her hand cautiously, smiling when Thunder snuffled at her palm. "He remembers you," Wade observed, watching the interaction with interest. "I owe him my life as much as I owe you," Victoria said, stroking the horse's velvety nose. Wade leaned against the fence beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. "He just did the carrying. You did the surviving." Victoria turned to look at him, struck again by the quiet strength in his features. The morning sun highlighted the touches of gold in his brown hair and the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the harsh western light. "I never properly thanked you," she said softly. "Not just for finding me, but for everything after. Taking me in, caring for me, contacting my uncle." "No need for thanks," Wade interrupted, suddenly looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Nevertheless, you have it," Victoria insisted. "Few men would have done what you did." Wade studied her face for a long moment, his blue eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You don't know much about me, Miss Maxwell. I'm not the hero you're making me out to be." "I know enough," she replied simply. "And please call me Victoria." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Victoria, then." The way her name sounded in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool spring air. Their moment was interrupted by the approach of Frank, the foreman, his expression tense. "Boss, riders coming in." 6 of them, moving fast from the east. Wade straightened immediately, all trace of the relaxed rancher gone in an instant. "Get back to the house," he told Victoria, his voice brooking no argument. "Tell Martha to bar the door and get the shotgun ready." Fear clutched at Victoria's heart. "Is it Harris?" "Don't know yet," Wade replied grimly, already striding toward the main house. "But we're not taking chances." Victoria hurried alongside him, her legs still weak from her ordeal but propelled by adrenaline. Behind them, the ranch hands were moving with practiced efficiency, taking up defensive positions around the property. They had just reached the porch when the riders came into view, a cloud of dust marking their rapid approach. Wade positioned himself in front of Victoria, one hand on the pistol at his hip. "Get inside," he ordered. Victoria hesitated, reluctant to leave him facing potential danger alone. "Please," Wade added, his eyes never leaving the approaching riders. "I can't protect you properly if I'm worrying about you being in the line of fire." The simple truth of his words convinced her. Victoria slipped inside, where Martha was already loading a formidable-looking shotgun, her normally gentle face set in determined lines. "Bolt that door behind you," the housekeeper instructed. "Then take position at the window there. If anyone tries to come through that door that isn't Wade or one of our boys, you sing out, you hear." Victoria nodded, moving to the window where she could see Wade standing on the porch, seemingly relaxed but with his hand still near his weapon as the riders drew closer. As the dust settled, Victoria's breath caught. She recognized the lead rider immediately, the territorial marshal, distinguished by his badge gleaming in the sunlight. Relief washed over her, quickly followed by confusion. What would bring the marshal here? Outside, Wade's posture had relaxed slightly, though vigilance remained in every line of his body as the marshal and his deputies dismounted. "Marshal Bennett," Wade greeted the lead rider. "Wasn't expecting a visit from the law today." The marshal, a weathered man in his 50s with iron-gray hair, removed his hat respectfully. "Blackburn, good to see you again, though I wish it was under different circumstances." "What circumstances would those be?" Wade asked, wariness evident in his tone. Marshal Bennett sighed heavily. "Got word that you might be harboring a woman who escaped from Jed Harris. Need to talk to her and to you." Victoria pressed closer to the window, straining to hear every word. "Miss Maxwell is recovering from a harrowing ordeal," Wade replied coolly. "What's so urgent it couldn't wait until she's fully recovered?" The marshal exchanged glances with his deputies before answering. "Harris has been stirring up trouble all over the territory, claiming the woman stole something valuable from him. He's offering a substantial reward for her return." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. Stolen something. The only thing she had taken was her freedom, her life. "And you believe him?" Wade's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "Course not," the marshal scoffed. "But his gang's growing bolder, attacking homesteads, threatening townsfolk. 3 people dead already. Need to get the woman's statement, find out what really happened." There was a moment of tense silence before Wade spoke again. "She's inside, but you treat her with respect, Bennett. She's been through hell." The marshal nodded solemnly. "Always do, Blackburn." "You know that." Wade turned toward the house, his eyes meeting Victoria's through the window. With a slight nod, he indicated it was safe for her to open the door. Martha lowered her shotgun but didn't put it away entirely as Victoria unbolted the door with trembling hands. The marshal and Wade entered, followed by 2 of the deputies while the others remained outside. "Miss Maxwell," the marshal greeted her, hat in hand. "I'm Territorial Marshal James Bennett. I understand you've had a difficult time recently." Victoria straightened her spine, summoning her courage. "That would be an understatement, Marshal." A ghost of a smile crossed the lawman's weathered face. "I imagined so. I need to ask you some questions about your encounter with Jed Harris and his gang if you're up to it." "I am," Victoria confirmed, though her heart raced at the prospect of reliving those terrible days. Wade moved to stand beside her, a silent offer of support that steadied her nerves. "We can use the study," he suggested, leading the way to a wood-paneled room lined with bookshelves. Once they were seated, Victoria in a comfortable leather chair, Wade standing protectively behind her, and the marshal and his deputy across from them, Bennett began his questioning. "Can you tell me what happened the day your stagecoach was attacked?" he asked, pulling out a small notebook. Victoria took a deep breath and began her account, the routine journey suddenly interrupted by gunfire, the driver and guard falling, the terrifying moments as Harris and his men surrounded the stagecoach. "There were two other passengers," she explained. "An elderly gentleman and a young man who said he was a schoolteacher. The bandits took them somewhere else. I don't know what happened to them." The marshal nodded grimly, making notes. "And how did you come to escape?" Victoria's hands twisted in her lap as she recounted the 3 days she had spent as Harris's captive, the degrading conditions, the threats, the leering advances she had fought off. "He kept saying I would fetch a good price in certain establishments across the border," she said quietly. "But he was waiting for something or someone before moving on. The third night they got careless. Most of them were drunk. I slipped away during the guard change." Wade's hand came to rest on the back of her chair, a subtle gesture of support that gave her strength to continue. "I ran for days. Tried to stay near water when I could find it. Avoided trails and roads, fearing they would look for me there. When Mr. Blackburn found me, I had been without water for nearly a day." Marshal Bennett finished writing and looked up, his expression grave. "Harris is claiming you stole something of great value from him, a map specifically." Victoria's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "A map? I took nothing except a small canteen and some jerky for survival. I was more concerned with escaping with my life than stealing his possessions." "What kind of map?" Wade asked sharply. The marshal shrugged. "He's not being specific in public, but word is it's a map to a gold cache loot from several bank robberies he's pulled over the years." Wade snorted derisively. "And you believe this story?" "Not particularly," Bennett replied. "But Harris has half the territory's drifters and desperados looking for Miss Maxwell with promises of reward money. Makes my job harder and puts innocent folks in danger." Victoria felt sick at the thought of being hunted, not just by Harris, but by countless opportunists seeking rewards. "What do you suggest?" Wade asked, his voice tightly controlled. The marshal closed his notebook. "For now, Miss Maxwell stays put. Double B Ranch is defensible, and your reputation still carries weight, Blackburn. Most smart troublemakers will think twice before crossing you." "And the not-so-smart ones," Wade pressed. Bennett's weathered face hardened. "My deputies and I will be increasing patrols in this area. Meanwhile, I'll work on tracking down Harris. Man's got to sleep sometime." The conversation continued, with the marshal gathering more specific details about Harris's camp and the number of men in his gang. By the time they finished, Victoria felt drained, the memories she'd been forced to revisit leaving her emotionally exhausted. As they walked the marshal and his men back to their horses, Bennett pulled Wade aside for a private word. Victoria couldn't hear what was said, but the grim set of Wade's jaw when he rejoined her spoke volumes. "What did he say to you?" she asked once the lawman had ridden away. Wade hesitated before answering. Bennett thinks Harris might come after you personally. The map story might be just an excuse. He's not a man who takes kindly to being outsmarted, especially by a woman. Fear clutched at Victoria's heart again. Then I should leave. I'm putting you and everyone here in danger by staying. Wade's hand caught hers, the unexpected contact sending warmth up her arm despite her distress. You're safer here than anywhere else right now. I've dealt with men like Harris before. The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have reassured her, but Victoria could only think of the danger she was bringing to this man who had already done so much for her. I don't want anyone else hurt because of me, she whispered. Wade's blue eyes held hers steadily. No one's getting hurt. You have my word. The conviction in his voice and the strength of his hand around hers made Victoria want to believe him, despite the fear that still lingered in her heart. That evening, after Doc Peterson had pronounced her recovering well, but in need of continued rest, Victoria sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The ranch had settled into its nighttime rhythm, with extra men posted as sentries around the perimeter, a precaution Wade had insisted upon after the marshal's visit. The screen door creaked open behind her, and Wade emerged, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Victoria before settling into the chair beside her. "Thank you," she murmured, grateful for both the coffee and the company. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the last rays of sunlight faded from the distant mountains. The vast emptiness of the Wyoming landscape, which had seemed so threatening during Victoria's desperate flight, now felt peaceful under Wade's protective presence. "Tell me about your life before all this," Wade said eventually. "What brought you to Wyoming in the first place?" Victoria sipped her coffee, gathering her thoughts. "My parents died last year, influenza. They left some debts, so I had to sell our home in Boston. Uncle William is my mother's brother. He wrote offering me a place to live and a position teaching at the new school in Laramie." "You're a teacher?" Wade asked, sounding genuinely interested. Victoria nodded. "I taught at a girls' academy in Boston for 2 years. I love it, opening young minds to knowledge, watching them discover their own potential." "We could use more educated folks out here," Wade commented. "Territory's growing, but schools are still few and far between." "What about you?" Victoria asked, turning the conversation away from herself. "Martha mentioned you've owned the ranch for 8 years, but she didn't say where you came from originally." A shadow of something memory, perhaps regret, crossed Wade's face. "Born in Missouri. Father was a blacksmith. Learned to track and shoot from an old trapper who lived nearby. When the war came, I was too young to fight, but afterward, there was plenty of call for men who could handle themselves in rough country. Became a deputy in Kansas at 19, U.S. Marshal by 23. And then," Victoria prompted gently when he fell silent. Wade's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. "Did the job for 6 years. Saw too much. Lost too much. Decided I'd rather build something than keep destroying things." The simplicity of his statement touched Victoria deeply. This man who had found her, saved her, had walked away from violence toward creation, toward nurturing life rather than taking it. "The Double B is a testament to that choice," she offered softly. "You've built something remarkable here." Wade glanced at her, surprise and something warmer flickering in his eyes. Most city folks see nothing but hardship and isolation in ranch life. "I see a community," Victoria replied honestly. "People working together, depending on each other. There's beauty in that." A comfortable silence fell between them again, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the chirping of evening crickets. Victoria was acutely aware of Wade beside her, his steady presence, the subtle scent of leather and soap that seemed to accompany him. the careful way he held himself slightly apart from her, even as his eyes conveyed a deepening interest. "You should know," Wade said abruptly, setting down his empty coffee cup, "that I've sent word to some former colleagues, men I trust who still wear badges or know how to use a gun. If Harris makes a move, we'll be ready." The implied promise of protection warmed Victoria even as it reminded her of the danger still looming. "You've already done so much. I can't ask for more." "You didn't ask," Wade pointed out. "I'm offering. Besides, bringing down Jed Harris would be a service to the entire territory." Victoria studied his profile in the gathering darkness, the strong jaw, the straight nose, the determined set of his mouth. In just a few days, this man had become her protector, her safe harbor in a storm of violence and fear. And something else was growing too, something that fluttered in her chest whenever their eyes met. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing the words were inadequate but unable to express the depth of her gratitude. Wade turned to look at her fully, his blue eyes reflecting the first emerging stars. "You don't have to keep thanking me, Victoria." The way he said her name gently, almost reverently, made her breath catch. For a charged moment, it seemed he might say more, might bridge the careful distance he maintained between them. Instead, he stood, offering his hand to help her up. "It's getting chilly. You should head inside before you catch cold. Last thing you need is to get sick after everything else." Victoria placed her hand in his, allowing him to assist her to her feet. His palm was warm and calloused against her fingers, the touch sending a subtle current up her arm. "Will you come in as well?" she asked, reluctant to end their conversation. Wade shook his head. "Need to check the perimeter one more time. Make sure the night watch is set proper." "Always vigilant, always protective." Victoria nodded in understanding, though disappointment tugged at her heart. "Good night then, Wade." "Good night, Victoria. Sleep well." As she went inside, Victoria couldn't help glancing back. Wade stood at the edge of the porch, his silhouette outlined against the darkening sky, watching over his domain and over her. The next week passed in a rhythm of gradual healing and increasing comfort, with the routines of ranch life. Victoria regained her strength steadily, moving from brief walks around the ranch yard to longer explorations of the nearby meadows and streams, always with Wade or one of his trusted hands nearby as escort. The threat from Harris remained, but as days passed without incident, some of the tension began to ease around the ranch. Victoria found herself drawn into the daily life of the Double B, helping Martha with household tasks, reading to young Elijah from Wade's surprisingly extensive library when the cowboy admitted he'd never learned his letters properly, even assisting Cook with bread making, much to the crusty old man's grudging approval. And through it all, her awareness of Wade Blackburn deepened into something that increasingly resembled affection. They shared coffee on the porch at sunrise, conversations over supper in the evening, and quiet moments throughout the day when their paths crossed. Victoria learned about the challenges of cattle ranching, the seasonal rhythms that governed life on the frontier, the dreams Wade harbored for expanding his operation to include horse breeding. In turn, she told him about growing up in Boston, her love of literature and music, her hopes of someday opening her own school rather than just teaching in someone else's. Wade listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering perspectives she had never considered. What began as gratitude evolved into respect, then friendship, and gradually into something neither of them named but both increasingly acknowledged through lingering glances and the subtle gravitation of their bodies toward each other in any shared space. On a particularly fine spring afternoon, Wade suggested a ride to show Victoria a special place on the property, a hidden valley where wildflowers bloomed in profusion, and a clear stream provided perfect picnicking grounds. Martha packed them a basket with sandwiches, apple pie, and a bottle of lemonade, her knowing smile following them as they rode out. Victoria had been given the gentlest mare in Wade's, Remuda, a dappled gray named Whisper, and had quickly reacquainted herself with riding skills learned in her youth. Wade, astride Thunder, set an easy pace, mindful of Victoria's still recovering strength. "It's not much farther," he promised as they crested a small rise, then gestured ahead. "There, what do you think?" Victoria gasped at the vista before her. A verdant valley spread out below, carpeted with bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, and golden poppies. A crystal-clear stream wound through the center, its banks lined with cottonwoods just beginning to leaf out in the spring sunshine. "It's magnificent," she breathed, "like something from a painting." Wade's expression softened with pleasure at her reaction. "Found this spot my first week on the ranch. Come here to think sometimes when decisions need making or troubles need sorting." The fact that he would share such a personal sanctuary touched Victoria deeply. They rode down into the valley, dismounting near the stream where Wade spread a blanket in the shade of a large cottonwood. The horses grazed contentedly nearby as Wade and Victoria unpacked Martha's generous provisions. "I've received another letter from my uncle," Victoria mentioned as they ate. "He's very grateful for your hospitality but anxious for me to continue to Laramie when it's safe." Something flickered across Wade's face, disappointment perhaps, before he nodded. "Only natural he'd want you there. Family's important." Victoria hesitated, then added, "I wrote back telling him I wasn't quite ready for travel yet, that I needed more time to recover." Wade looked up sharply, studying her face. "Are you having problems you haven't mentioned, pain or weakness?" "I can send for Doc Peterson again." "No, nothing like that," Victoria interrupted, a flush rising to her cheeks. I'm not ready to leave yet." The simple admission hung in the air between them, its implications clear. Wade's expression shifted from concern to something warmer, more intense. "The double beatik's been richer for your presence," he said quietly. "Everyone's taken a shine to you." "Everyone?" Victoria asked, her heart beating faster as Wade's gaze held hers. "Especially the ranch owner," he admitted, the corner of his mouth lifting in a half-smile. "Man would be a fool not to appreciate having you around, Victoria." The way he said her name like it was something precious on his tongue sent a shiver of delight through her. Victoria gathered her courage, deciding honesty was the only path forward. "I've come to care for you, Wade. More than I should, perhaps, given the circumstances of our meeting and the brevity of our acquaintance." Wade set aside his plate, moving closer to her on the blanket. "Some things don't need much time to take root, especially when they're true and strong to begin with." His hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining with gentle pressure. Victoria marveled at how right it felt, this connection between them that had begun in desperate circumstances and blossomed into something neither had anticipated. "What happens when Harris is caught?" Wade asked suddenly. "Will you still go to Laramie?" The question caught Victoria off guard, though she had asked herself the same thing many times in recent days. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "I came west to start a new life, to find purpose after losing my parents. Teaching was to be that purpose." "Teaching still needed, even outside Laramie," Wade pointed out, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "Settlement 15 miles from here is growing. Families with children. No school yet, but folks have been talking about the need." Victoria's heart quickened at the implication. "Are you suggesting I could teach there instead?" "Just noting possibilities," Wade replied, though his eyes told a different story, one of hope and nascent dreams that included her. "You have choices, is all I'm saying, when the time comes." Their conversation might have deepened further, but a distant shout interrupted the moment. Wade was on his feet instantly, hand going to the pistol at his hip as he scanned the ridgeline. Frank, the foreman, appeared on horseback at the top of the rise, waving urgently. "Trouble," Wade muttered, helping Victoria quickly gather their picnic things. "We need to get back to the ranch." They mounted swiftly, Wade taking the lead as they rode up to meet Frank. The foreman's expression was grim, his normally ruddy face pale beneath his weathered tan. "Riders spotted heading toward the north pasture," he reported tersely. 8, maybe 10 of them, moving fast and purposeful like. "Harris?" Wade asked sharply. Frank nodded. Elijah recognized him through the spyglass. "Got that eye patch and red bandana just like Miss Victoria described." Fear clutched at Victoria's heart, her brief idyll of peace and growing affection shattered by the reality of the danger that had been stalking her all along. "How long do we have?" Wade demanded, already turning thunder toward the ranch house. 20 minutes, maybe less," Frank estimated. "Boys are gathering the remuda and moving the closest cattle. I sent Elijah to alert the house." Wade nodded grimly, then turned to Victoria. "We need to ride hard. Can you manage it?" Victoria straightened in her saddle, determination replacing fear. "Yes." With a quick nod of approval, Wade spurred thunder forward. "Stay between us, Victoria. Frank will bring up the rear." The 3 riders galloped across the rolling grassland, taking the most direct route back to the ranch. Victoria clung to Whisper's mane, the wind whipping tears from her eyes as they rode at breakneck speed. All the while, her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. What did Harris want? The non-existent map he claimed she had stolen, revenge for her escape, or something worse. As they thundered into the ranch yard, Victoria saw that Wade's men had already prepared for trouble. Horses had been moved into the barn, cattle driven toward distant pastures, and ranch hands with rifles took up positions around the main buildings. Wade helped Victoria dismount, his face a mask of controlled urgency. "Get inside with Martha. Stay away from windows. I've got a safe room built behind the pantry Martha will show you." Victoria gripped his arm, suddenly terrified that this might be the last time she saw him alive. "Wade, don't, I'll be fine," he cut her off gently, his hand briefly covering hers where it clutched his sleeve. "This is what I was trained for, Victoria. Trust me to handle it." Before she could respond, Martha appeared at the door, shotgun in hand. "Come on, girl. Let the men do what needs doing." With one last desperate look at Wade memorizing his face, the determined set of his jaw, the fierce protectiveness in his blue eyes, Victoria allowed Martha to pull her into the house. As the door closed behind them, Victoria heard Wade issuing rapid orders to his men. Martha led her through the kitchen to the large pantry, where she pushed aside several flour barrels to reveal a hidden door built seamlessly into the wall. "Wade had this constructed when he first bought the place," Martha explained, lighting a lamp inside the small, windowless room. "Used to be a stopping point for the Underground Railroad before the war. Previous owner showed him the secret." The room contained a narrow cot, several water barrels, preserved food supplies, and Victoria noted with a mixture of surprise and grim understanding a loaded rifle propped in one corner. "We're not hiding in here yet," Martha declared firmly. "Just wanted to show you where it is in case things go south. Meanwhile, I aim to keep watch and be ready to defend what's ours." Victoria stood straighter, drawing strength from the older woman's courage. "Give me a weapon too. I won't cower while others fight for me." Martha assessed her with newfound respect. "Can you shoot?" My father taught me with a small derringer for self-protection, but I've never fired a rifle, Victoria admitted. The housekeeper nodded, retrieving a small revolver from a cabinet. This is simpler than a derringer. Just aim and pull the trigger. 6 shots before you need to reload, which I don't expect you'll have to do. Victoria accepted the weapon, its weight both frightening and reassuring in her palm. Thank you, Martha. Now we wait, the older woman said grimly, positioning herself at a window that offered a view of the ranch yard while providing cover. And we pray that Jed Harris has finally met his match in Wade Blackburn. Outside, Wade had deployed his men with the tactical precision of his martial days. The main house was the most defensible building on the property, with the barn and bunkhouse providing additional cover. He positioned shooters at strategic points, ensuring overlapping fields of fire while maintaining routes of retreat if needed. When Harris and his gang appeared on the ridge overlooking the ranch, Wade was ready. He stood alone in the yard, seemingly exposed but with rifle-wielding cowboys hidden in precise positions around him. The gang approached slowly, Harris easily identifiable in the lead with his distinctive eye patch and red bandana. They halted just within speaking distance, spreading out in an intimidating line. "That's far enough," Wade called out, his voice carrying across the yard with calm authority. "State your business, Harris," the outlaw sneered, revealing tobacco-stained teeth beneath his unkempt mustache. "My business is with the woman you're harboring, Blackburn, the thief who stole what's mine." "Miss Maxwell stole nothing except her freedom from your captivity," Wade replied evenly. "Which was hers by right." Harris spat contemptuously on the ground. "She took something valuable, a map. I want it back, and I want her to tell me what she did with it." "There is no map," Wade stated firmly. "The territorial marshals already investigated her story. She took nothing but a canteen and some food when she escaped your camp." From her vantage point at the window, Victoria could see the confrontation unfolding. Her heart pounded painfully against her ribs as she watched Wade standing alone against Harris and his men. Martha stood beside her, shotgun ready, her weathered face set in grim lines. "He's lying," Harris snarled to his men. "The woman's in there and so's my property. I mean to have both back." Wade's stance shifted subtly, his hand hovering near his holstered pistol. "You're not taking anything or anyone from this ranch, Harris. You've got 2 choices right away now and keep breathing, or push this and end up in a pine box. Your decision." Harris laughed, an ugly sound devoid of humor. Big talk from a washed-up lawman playing at being a rancher. "There's 10 of us and 1 of you." "Count again," Wade replied calmly. As if on cue, the hidden cowboys revealed themselves, rifles trained on the outlaws from multiple positions. Harris's men shifted nervously, several reaching for their weapons before their leader barked at them to hold steady. "Still thinking those are good odds, Harris?" Wade asked, a dangerous edge to his voice. The outlaw's single visible eye narrowed with hatred. "This ain't over, Blackburn, not by a long shot. That woman's got something of mine, and I mean to have it back." "There is no map," Wade repeated. "And even if there was, it wouldn't be worth dying for. Not today. Not here." For a tense moment, the tableau held Harris and his men facing Wade and his cowboys across the sun-baked yard, death balanced on the edge of a trigger pull. Then Harris made a small gesture with his hand, and his men began to back their horses slowly away. "I'll be seeing you again, Blackburn," Harris called out, his voice promising violence to come. "When you least expect it. And that woman too. Tell her Jed Harris always collects what's owed him." Wade remained motionless, watching as the gang retreated over the ridge and disappeared from sight. Only when they were completely gone did he relax his stance, turning to give orders to his men too to follow at a distance, and ensure the gang truly left Double B land, others to maintain vigilance around the perimeter. Inside the house, Victoria released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's gone," she whispered, relief washing over her in a dizzying wave. "For now," Martha added grimly, lowering her shotgun. But Wade was right, a man like Harris doesn't give up easy, especially when his pride's been hurt. Victoria sank into a chair, the revolver heavy in her lap. "I don't understand. There never was any map. Why is he so convinced I took it?" Martha shook her head. "Who knows? Maybe someone in his gang stole it and blamed you. Maybe there never was a map, and he's just using it as an excuse to come after you for escaping. Men like Harris can't abide being outsmarted, especially by a woman." The front door opened, and Victoria instinctively raised the revolver before recognizing Wade's tall figure. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, his face etched with concern as he gently took the gun from her trembling hands. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Victoria nodded, though tears threatened at the corners of her eyes. "Thanks to you. Again." Wade knelt before her chair, one hand coming to rest on hers. "He's gone for now, but this isn't over. Harris isn't a man who makes empty threats." "What do we do?" Victoria asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Wade's expression hardened with resolve. "We end this, once and for all." The plan came together quickly over the next 2 days. Wade sent riders to notify Marshal Bennett of the confrontation and to summon the additional help he had requested from former colleagues. The Double B became a hive of activity as defenses were strengthened and strategies debated. Victoria insisted on being included in these discussions, refusing to be treated as a helpless victim. After initial resistance, Wade grudgingly acknowledged that her insights into Harris's camp and routines might prove valuable. "Harris is convinced you took this map," Wade said during one strategy session in the study. "He's obsessed with it. That gives us an advantage. He's predictable in his pursuit." "But I never saw any map," Victoria protested for what felt like the 100th time. Wade nodded. "I believe you." "But what if Harris thinks you did?" Victoria's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "What if we let Harris believe we have the map?" Wade suggested, a plan taking shape. "Or rather, that we know where it is." Frank, who had been standing by the window keeping watch, turned with interest. "You're thinking of setting a trap?" Wade nodded, his blue eyes glinting with determined purpose. "Harris won't stop coming after Victoria as long as he believes she has what he wants. We need to draw him out on our terms in a place of our choosing." "Using me as bait," Victoria concluded, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. Wade's gaze locked with hers, his expression grim. "I don't like it either, but Harris has to be stopped or you'll never be safe, not here, not in Laramie, not anywhere." The truth of his words settled heavily in the room. Victoria squared her shoulders, making her decision. "What do you need me to do?" Before Wade could answer, a ranch hand burst into the study, his expression urgent. "Riders coming in from the east, boss." "But it's not Harris. Looks like Marshal Bennett and some others." Wade was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. Relief washed over his features as he recognized the approaching group. "It's Bennett all right, and he's brought help. That's Sam Reeves with him, best tracker in the territory. And the big fellow at the back is Mike Donovan, used to be a Pinkerton." Victoria joined him at the window, watching as 6 dust-covered riders approached the ranch house. Among them was a figure that made her gasp in surprise. "That's Uncle William," she exclaimed, joy and confusion mingling in her voice. Wade's hand found the small of her back, a steadying presence as they moved to greet the newcomers. Victoria rushed forward as her uncle dismounted, throwing herself into his embrace with tears of relief. William Maxwell was a distinguished man in his 50s, his once dark hair now liberally streaked with gray, his face weathered by years on the frontier. He held Victoria at arm's length, examining her with concern. "Thank God you're safe," he said fervently. "When that telegram came saying you'd escaped Harris but were injured, I've been beside myself with worry." "I'm fine, Uncle," Victoria assured him. "Thanks to Mr. Blackburn and his people." William turned to Wade, extending his hand. "I can never repay you for what you've done for my niece, Blackburn. You have my eternal gratitude." Wade accepted the handshake firmly. "No repayment necessary, Mr. Maxwell. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," William contradicted. "Not many men would take in a stranger and then stand against Jed Harris to protect her." Marshal Bennett interrupted the reunion, his expression grave. "Speaking of Harris, we picked up his trail about 10 miles east of here. He's gathering more men. Looks like he's planning something big." Wade's jaw tightened. "Come inside. We were just discussing how to deal with Harris permanently." As the group moved into the house, Victoria found herself studying the interaction between Wade and her uncle. There was mutual respect evident in their manner, but also a subtle tension she couldn't quite identify. Wade's hand remained at the small of her back, a possessive gesture that did not go unnoticed by William, whose eyebrows raised slightly before his expression became carefully neutral. Inside, Martha served coffee and food to the weary travelers while Wade outlined his plan to use Harris's obsession with the non-existent map as a trap. "We send word through channels Harris is likely to monitor that Victoria has hidden the map in a specific location and plans to retrieve it," Wade explained. "We choose the ground, set up our forces, and wait for him to take the bait." Marshal Bennett nodded slowly. "Could work." "Harris is arrogant enough to think he can outsmart any trap." "But it puts Victoria in danger," William objected, his protective instinct evident in every line of his body. "I won't allow my niece to be used as bait for a killer." Victoria straightened in her chair. "With all due respect, Uncle, it's not your decision to make. As long as Harris believes I have his map, I'll never be truly safe. I want this to end." William studied her face, noting the determination in her eyes so like her mother's when she had set her mind to something. "You've changed," he observed quietly. "The niece I remember from her letters was more cautious, more proper." "Nearly dying changes a person," Victoria replied simply. "So does finding strength you never knew you possessed." Her uncle nodded slowly, a mixture of pride and concern in his gaze. "Very well, but I insist on being part of this operation. I was a captain in the war, Marshal. I know something about strategy and firearms." Bennett nodded. "Every gun helps. Now, where do we set this trap?" Wade spread a map of the territory on the table. "There's an abandoned mining camp in the foothills, about 15 miles northeast of here. Defensible, with good sight lines and multiple escape routes if things go wrong." The men gathered around the map, discussing positioning, timing, and contingencies. Victoria remained engaged throughout, offering insights about Harris's behavior and habits that might prove useful. As the planning continued, Victoria became increasingly aware of Wade's presence beside her, the warmth of his body near hers, the brush of his hand against hers when they both pointed to the same spot on the map, the way his eyes sought hers when important decisions were being made, as if her opinion mattered as much as any man's in the room. By evening, the plan was set. Word would be spread through carefully chosen channels that Victoria had hidden Harris's map at the abandoned mining camp and planned to retrieve it in 3 days' time. Meanwhile, Wade, Bennett, and their combined forces would prepare the site, setting up positions and establishing a perimeter that would allow Harris and his gang to enter, but not to leave undetected. As the group dispersed for the night, Bennett and his deputies to the bunkhouse, William to the guest room Martha had prepared, and the others to various assigned quarters, Wade caught Victoria's arm gently. "Walk with me," he asked quietly. Victoria nodded, ignoring her uncle's speculative glance as they slipped outside. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. They walked in silence toward the corral where Thunder and the other horses drowsed peacefully. "Are you sure about this?" Wade asked finally, turning to face her. "There's still time to change the plan. You could go to Laramie with your uncle, start that teaching position. Let us handle Harris." Victoria shook her head firmly. "He would follow me there eventually." "No, this needs to end now, and I need to be part of ending it." Wade studied her face in the moonlight, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known, Victoria Maxwell." "I don't feel brave," she admitted softly. "I'm terrified. But I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it." Wade's hand came up to touch her cheek gently. A wise observation. Victoria leaned into his touch, her heart racing at the tenderness in his gaze. "Wade, if something happens, nothing's going to happen to you," he interrupted fiercely. "I won't allow it." "I know you'll do everything in your power to protect me," she acknowledged. "But we both know there are no guarantees, so before we face whatever comes next, I need to tell you." She faltered, suddenly unsure of herself. What right did she have to burden this man with her feelings when they might both be dead in 3 days' time? Wade's fingers tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Tell me what?" he prompted gently. Victoria gathered her courage. "That meeting you, even under such terrible circumstances, has been the most profound blessing of my life. That in these few weeks, I've come to care for you in ways I never expected. That whatever happens with Harris, I will always be grateful for the time we've had." For a moment, Wade said nothing, and Victoria feared she had overstepped, revealing too much too soon. Then his arms were around her, pulling her against his chest with careful strength, his face buried in her hair. "Victoria," he murmured, her name a prayer on his lips. "I've been fighting this feeling since I found you in the wilderness, telling myself it was just protectiveness, just duty, but it's so much more." He drew back slightly, his hands framing her face with exquisite gentleness. "I love you. Probably have since the moment you tried to stand despite everything you'd been through, too stubborn to give up even when you had every right to." Joy bloomed in Victoria's chest, bright and fierce, despite the danger that still loomed in their future. "I love you too, Wade Blackburn." When his lips found hers in the moonlight, it felt like coming home after a long journey, tender at first, then deepening with shared passion, and the knowledge that tomorrow was promised to no one. Victoria's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer as they poured everything they couldn't say into the kiss. They broke apart at the sound of a throat clearing nearby. William Maxwell stood a few yards away, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Uncle," Victoria acknowledged, embarrassment coloring her cheeks though she didn't step away from Wade. "I came to check on you," William said carefully. "It's getting late, and tomorrow will be a busy day of preparations." Wade kept one arm around Victoria's waist, facing her uncle squarely. "Mr. Maxwell, I should tell you that my intentions toward your niece are serious and honorable." William's eyebrows rose slightly. "Is that so? You've known her, what, 2 weeks?" 17 days, Wade corrected without hesitation. "But some things don't need much time to be certain." Victoria's heart swelled at the quiet confidence in Wade's voice. William studied them both for a long moment before his stern expression softened slightly. "Victoria has always been a good judge of character," he conceded. and any man who would risk his life to protect her, as you have done, deserves consideration. But this conversation should perhaps wait until after the current crisis is resolved." Wade nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in the older man's words. "Fair enough." "Good night, then," William said, his gaze lingering on Victoria's flushed, happy face before he turned and walked back toward the house. When they were alone again, Wade pressed his forehead against Victoria's, his hands clasping hers between them. "Your uncle's right about one thing: we should focus on dealing with Harris first. But afterward." "Afterward," Victoria agreed, her heart full of hope despite the dangers that still lay ahead. They shared one more kiss, sealed with promises neither spoke aloud but both understood completely, before returning to the house hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next together. The next 2 days were a flurry of preparation. Wade and Marshal Bennett rode out with several men to prepare the abandoned mining camp, setting up defensive positions and planning for every contingency. Victoria remained at the ranch with her uncle, Martha, and a rotating guard of capable ranch hands, reviewing her role in the plan and practicing with the small revolver until she could load and fire it with reasonable accuracy. Word was carefully spread through selected channels about Victoria's supposed plan to retrieve the hidden map. A former deputy of Bennett's, now working as a bartender in the nearest town, made sure the information would reach Harris's ears through the network of drifters and opportunists that served as the outlaw's eyes and ears in the territory. On the morning of the third day, Victoria, dressed in practical riding clothes provided by Martha's sturdy trousers beneath a split skirt, a man's shirt modified to fit her smaller frame, and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the sun. The outfit was a far cry from the elegant dresses she had worn in Boston, but Victoria found she preferred the freedom of movement it allowed. Wade watched her descend the stairs, admiration evident in his gaze. "You look ready for anything," he commented, offering her a cup of coffee. Victoria accepted it gratefully, trying to calm the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I hope so." They were to ride out in 1 hour. Victoria, Wade, her uncle, and 2 of Wade's most trusted hands. Marshal Bennett and the rest of their force were already in position at the mining camp, having slipped out before dawn to avoid detection. "Remember," Wade said quietly as they stood on the porch watching the sun climb higher in the sky, "you're to stay with your uncle in the old assayer's office. It has the best protection and a back exit if things go wrong." Victoria nodded, though the thought of being separated from Wade during the confrontation made her heart clench with fear. "And you'll be with Bennett in the main approach. Harris will expect an ambush. He's not stupid, but he's arrogant enough to think he can overcome it. When he comes, we'll be ready." The confidence in his voice should have reassured her, but Victoria couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over her since waking. Wade seemed to sense her unease, his hand finding hers and squeezing gently. "I promise to keep you safe," he reminded her softly. "It's a promise I intend to keep." Victoria mustered a smile, drawing strength from his unwavering resolve. "I know you will." The ride to the mining camp was tense but uneventful. They approached cautiously, using a route that kept them hidden from any observers who might be watching the main trail. As they neared the collection of weathered buildings that had once housed a thriving silver mining operation, Marshal Bennett emerged from the shadows to greet them. "All quiet so far," he reported in a low voice. "My men are in position. No sign of Harris yet, but we've spotted what might be scouts on the ridge to the north." Wade nodded grimly. "He'll come. The question is how many men he'll bring and how he'll approach." Victoria was escorted to the assayer's office, a small but sturdy stone building near the center of the camp. Inside, William was already checking and rechecking his rifle, his military training evident in his methodical movements. "Stay away from the windows," he instructed Victoria as she entered, "and keep your revolver ready, but don't use it unless absolutely necessary. Gunfire will draw attention we don't want." Victoria nodded, taking up position behind an overturned desk that provided additional cover. Through a small, grimy window, she could see part of the camp's main street and the entrance to the old mine shaft that was supposedly where she had hidden the non-existent map. The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. The camp was eerily silent, the tension building with each passing minute. Victoria's nerves were stretched to the breaking point by the time the first shot rang out, the sound echoing off the surrounding hills like a crack of thunder. "It started," William said grimly, moving to a position where he could cover the door while maintaining sight of the window. More gunfire erupted, followed by shouts and the pounding of hoofbeats. Victoria's heart hammered in her chest as she strained to make sense of the chaos unfolding outside. Was Wade all right? Had Harris brought more men than expected? Suddenly, the door burst open. Victoria raised her revolver, finger tightening on the trigger, only to lower it again when she recognized Mike Donovan, the former Pinkerton. "Harris split his forces," Donovan reported breathlessly. "Half coming in the main entrance as expected, half circling around from the east. Bennett and Blackburn are engaged with the main force, but 3 or 4 are heading this way." William swore under his breath. "They're after Victoria specifically. Get her out the back way now," Donovan nodded, turning to Victoria. "Stay low and follow me. There's a path through the rocks that leads to where we've got horses ready." Victoria hesitated, torn between the safety of escape and her desperate need to know Wade was all right. "What about Blackburn can handle himself?" Donovan cut her off. "He told me to get you to safety at all costs if things went south. Now move." With a last anguished look at her uncle, Victoria followed Donovan through the back door of the assayer's office and into a narrow alley between buildings. They had just reached the edge of the camp when a bullet splintered the wood beside Victoria's head. "Run!" Donovan shouted, pushing her toward the rocks as he turned to return fire. Victoria sprinted for cover, her lungs burning as she scrambled up the rocky slope. Behind her, she heard more gunshots, a cry of pain, and then heavy footsteps in pursuit. Risking a glance back, she saw a figure she recognized with sickening clarity: Jed Harris himself, his face contorted with rage as he closed the distance between them. "Nowhere left to run, girl," he shouted, his voice carrying on the wind. "Give me the map, and maybe I'll kill you quick." Victoria ducked behind a boulder, drawing her revolver with shaking hands. Harris was right, there was nowhere left to run. The path Donovan had mentioned was nowhere in sight, and the outlaw was between her and the camp where Wade and the others were fighting. "I don't have your map," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "I never did." Harris's laugh was chilling. "Then you're of no use to me, are you? But I still owe you for the trouble you've caused." He fired, the bullet ricocheting off the rock near Victoria's head, showering her with stone fragments. She returned fire instinctively, the revolver's recoil jarring her wrist. Her shot went wide, but it forced Harris to dive for cover. "Not bad for a schoolteacher," he taunted. "But you've only got 5 shots left, and I can wait all day." Victoria's mind raced. Harris was right, she couldn't win a prolonged gunfight. She needed to either find a way past him or hold out until help arrived. But with the battle still raging in the camp below, how long would that take? Peering cautiously around the boulder, she spotted a depression in the rocks about 20 yards away, a potential route down the other side of the slope if she could reach it. But Harris would surely shoot her the moment she broke cover. Last chance, Harris called out. Throw out the gun and tell me where the map is. Victoria took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she needed to do. There is no map, Harris. You've been chasing a ghost. With that, she fired twice in rapid succession toward Harris's position, then sprinted for the depression, zigzagging as she ran. A bullet whined past her ear, another kicked up dirt at her feet. But somehow, miraculously, she reached the relative safety of the new position unscathed. Harris howled with rage, firing wildly in her direction. I'm going to make you suffer for this, girl. No one makes a fool of Jed Harris. Victoria pressed herself against the rock face, breathing hard, mentally counting her remaining bullets. 3, not enough. She needed a plan, a way out, a miracle. That's when she heard a familiar voice calling her name from somewhere below. Wade. Hope surged through her, giving her renewed strength. If she could hold Harris off just a little longer. Your friends are busy dying down there, Harris snarled, apparently having heard Wade's call as well. No one's coming to save you this time. The sound of boots on rock told Victoria that Harris was moving, trying to flank her position. She risked a glance around the edge of her shelter and caught a glimpse of movement to her right. Aiming carefully, she fired again. Harris cursed as the bullet grazed his arm, spinning him half around before he caught himself. Blood stained his sleeve, but the wound didn't appear serious enough to slow him down. Nice try, he growled, his single eye gleaming with malevolent purpose. 2 bullets left by my count. Victoria retreated deeper into the rocky depression, discovering to her surprise that it widened into a narrow cleft that might offer a path downward. Hope flared in her chest if she could make her way down. She might be able to circle back to the camp or find the horses Donovan had mentioned. Before she could act on this discovery, a shadow fell across the entrance to her shelter. Harris stood there, pistol aimed directly at her heart, a triumphant sneer twisting his features. End of the line, he said coldly. Victoria raised her revolver, determined to take him with her if this was truly to be her end. But before either of them could fire, a shot rang out from farther up the slope. Harris staggered forward, a look of surprise replacing his sneer as blood blossomed on his chest. He turned, firing wildly toward this new threat, then crumpled to his knees as 2 more shots struck him in rapid succession. Harris toppled forward, his body sliding grotesquely down the rocky incline to land in a broken heap at Victoria's feet. Victoria, Wade's voice called urgently. Victoria, answer me. Here, she cried, her voice breaking with relief. I'm here, Wade. He appeared at the entrance to the cleft, rifle still in hand, his face streaked with dirt and what might have been blood. When he saw her alive, whole, standing over Harris's body, the tension drained from his shoulders. Are you hurt? He demanded, quickly crossing to her side. Victoria shook her head, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what had just happened. Her legs buckled beneath her, and Wade caught her before she could fall, gathering her against his chest with fierce protectiveness. I thought I'd lost you, he murmured into her hair. When Donovan came back wounded, saying Harris was after you. Victoria clung to him, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and gunpowder and something uniquely Wade. Is it over? Are you all right? What about Uncle William and the others? It's over, Wade confirmed, his arms tightening around her. Harris's men either surrendered or fled when they saw they were outgunned. Your uncle took a bullet to the shoulder, but the doc says he'll recover. Bennett lost 1 deputy, and a couple of others are wounded, but we won. The relief was so overwhelming that Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. Wade gently wiped them away with his thumb, his gaze never leaving her face. Let's get you down from here, he said softly. It's finally over, Victoria. You're safe now, truly safe. As they made their way carefully down the slope, Victoria leaning on Wade's strength, she looked back once at Harris's broken body, the man who had haunted her nightmares for weeks, now reduced to nothing but cooling flesh and spilled blood. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound relief that the nightmare was finally ended. The aftermath of the battle was a blur of activity. The wounded were treated by Doc Peterson, who had accompanied Bennett's posse. Bodies Harris's and those of his men who hadn't survived were loaded onto wagons for transport to the nearest town for proper burial. Marshal Bennett took statements from everyone involved, the details of the encounter to be recorded in official reports. Through it all, Wade remained at Victoria's side, a steady presence that anchored her amid the chaos. When her uncle's wound had been treated and he was resting comfortably, Victoria finally allowed herself to be led away from the mining camp back toward the Double B, where Martha waited anxiously for news. The ride home was conducted in exhausted silence, the events of the day taking their toll on everyone. Victoria rode beside Wade, occasionally catching his eye and sharing a look that contained everything they didn't have the energy to say aloud: relief, gratitude, love. It was dusk by the time they reached the ranch. Martha burst from the house the moment they rode into the yard, her usual composure abandoned as she rushed to assure herself that they were all truly safe. "Thank the Lord," she exclaimed, helping Victoria dismount with gentle hands. "When we heard the shooting, I've been beside myself with worry." "It's over, Martha," Wade told her as he swung down from Thunder's back. "Harris is dead, his gang scattered or captured." The housekeeper's weathered face crumpled with relief. "And none too soon. Come inside, all of you. There's hot food waiting and beds made up." Victoria was only too happy to comply, her body suddenly registering every ache and pain from the day's ordeal. She had just enough energy to eat a small portion of Martha's beef stew before exhaustion claimed her completely. Wade helped her up the stairs to her room, his hand steady at her elbow. At her door, he paused, searching her face with concerned eyes. "Will you be all right?" he asked softly. "I can have Martha stay with you if you don't want to be alone." Victoria shook her head, summoning a tired smile. "I'll be fine, just tired." Wade nodded, though his expression suggested he was reluctant to leave her. "We'll talk tomorrow then, when you've rested." "Tomorrow," Victoria agreed, her heart full despite her exhaustion. "Good night, Wade." He brushed a gentle kiss across her forehead. "Good night, Victoria. Sleep well." Despite her bone-deep fatigue, sleep proved elusive. Victoria lay awake in the darkness, her mind replaying the events at the mining camp, the gunfire, Harris's face as he cornered her, the moment she thought she might die. Even knowing he was dead, that the threat was finally gone, she couldn't seem to quiet the turmoil in her mind. After an hour of restless tossing, Victoria rose and wrapped a shawl around her nightdress. Perhaps a cup of tea would help settle her nerves. The house was quiet as she made her way downstairs, though a light still burned in the study. Victoria paused outside the partially open door, hearing low voices within Wade and her uncle, apparently deep in conversation. "Understand your feelings, Blackburn," William was saying, his voice tired but firm. "But you must see that Victoria needs time. After everything she's been through, rushing into another major life change would be unwise." "With all due respect, sir," Wade replied, "I believe that's for Victoria to decide." There was a pause before William spoke again. "You're right, of course, but as her only family, I feel obligated to look out for her best interests. The position in Laramie is still open, waiting for her. It represents the fresh start she came west to find." "And if her fresh start includes me?" Wade asked quietly. Victoria held her breath, waiting for her uncle's response. "Then I would not stand in the way of her happiness," William said finally. "But I would ask that you give her time to recover from her ordeal, time to be sure of her own mind and heart without the pressure of danger and gratitude clouding her judgment." "I've never underestimated Victoria's judgment," Wade replied. "But I take your point. I won't press her for decisions while she's still recovering from today." Victoria backed away from the door, her heart conflicted. Part of her was touched by her uncle's concern, while another part bristled at the implication that she didn't know her own mind. As for Wade, the restraint in his voice suggested he truly would step back if she needed time, even if doing so pained him. Instead of continuing to the kitchen, Victoria returned quietly to her room, her thoughts in turmoil. By the time she finally drifted into sleep, the first gray light of dawn was seeping through her curtains. She awoke to late morning sunlight and the sounds of activity outside her window. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. Where was she? Was she safe? Then memory returned, bringing with it the knowledge that Harris was dead. The danger passed. After dressing quickly, Victoria made her way downstairs to find Martha in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with vigorous movements. "There you are," the housekeeper greeted her. "Thought you might sleep the day away, and who could blame you? There's coffee still hot and eggs I can fix fresh." "Thank you, Martha," Victoria replied, helping herself to coffee. "Where is everyone? Your uncle's resting doc says he needs to keep that shoulder still for a few days." "Wade and the boys are out checking the herd. Yesterday's excitement had the cattle spooked half to death." Victoria nodded, grateful for the simple normality of ranch life continuing despite everything that had happened. "And Marshal Bennett?" "Left at first light with his deputies and the prisoners," Martha informed her, shaping the dough into loaves. "Said to tell you he'd be back in a few days to take your official statement for his report." Victoria sipped her coffee, staring out the kitchen window at the vast Wyoming landscape stretching toward the horizon. For the first time since the stagecoach attack, she felt truly free from fear, free from pursuit, free to choose her own path forward. But what path would that be? The teaching position in Laramie that had brought her west in the first place? Or something entirely unexpected, a life here at the Double B with Wade, helping to build something meaningful together? As if summoned by her thoughts, Wade appeared in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the bright morning light. His eyes found hers immediately, a smile breaking across his face. "You're up," he said simply, crossing to pour himself coffee. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Victoria replied honestly. "More myself than I have in weeks." Wade nodded, understanding in his gaze. "That's good. The first night after a fight is often the hardest." Martha, with the intuition of a woman who had seen much in her lifetime, made a show of checking her bread dough. "These need to rise a spell. Think I'll go see if your uncle needs anything, Miss Victoria." When they were alone, Wade settled into the chair across from Victoria, his hands cradling his coffee cup. "I spoke with your uncle last night," he began. "I know," Victoria admitted. "I couldn't sleep. I was coming down for tea and heard you talking." A shadow of concern crossed Wade's features. "How much did you hear?" "Enough," she replied. "He thinks I need time. That gratitude might be clouding my judgment regarding my feelings for you." Wade's gaze held her steadily. "Is he right?" Victoria considered the question seriously. Was what she felt for Wade merely gratitude for his protection, admiration for his courage? Or was it something deeper, more lasting? "No," she said finally, with quiet certainty. "What I feel for you began as gratitude, certainly. But it's grown into something far more profound. I know my own mind, Wade, and my own heart." Relief washed across his face, followed by a tenderness that made her breath catch. "That's good to hear, because I've been doing some thinking of my own." He reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "I understand if you still want to go to Laramie to take that teaching position. It's what you came west for, and I wouldn't ask you to give up your dreams." Victoria squeezed his hands, warmth spreading through her at his touch. Dreams can change, or expand to include new possibilities. Hope kindled in Wade's blue eyes. "Does that mean you might consider staying here at the Double B?" "I might," Victoria replied, a smile tugging at her lips, "if I had a good reason to stay." Wade's expression turned serious. "I love you, Victoria Maxwell. I think I've loved you since I found you in the wilderness, too stubborn to give up even when anyone else would have. You're the bravest, strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known." He rose from his chair, still holding her hands, and to Victoria's astonishment, lowered himself to one knee beside her. "I know it's fast," he continued, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But when you find something this true, this right, there's no sense in waiting. Victoria, will you marry me? Will you make a life with me here, help me build something worth building?" Tears of joy sprang to Victoria's eyes. This man who had saved her life, who had protected her without trying to diminish her strength, who saw her as an equal partner rather than someone to be sheltered, he was offering her not just his heart but a future together. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Wade Blackburn, I will marry you." His face lit with such joy that Victoria's heart felt it might burst. Wade rose, pulling her into his arms and capturing her lips in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, tender yet passionate, gentle yet fiercely devoted. When they finally broke apart, Wade pressed his forehead against hers, his hands framing her face with exquisite care. "I'll speak to your uncle properly," he promised. "Ask his blessing." Victoria smiled, confident in her uncle's eventual approval despite his concerns. "He wants my happiness above all else. Once he sees how happy you make me, he'll come around." The sound of a throat clearing from the doorway made them both turn. William stood there, his arm in a sling but his expression softer than Victoria had expected. "I see you've made your decision," he observed, his gaze taking in their embrace and the radiant joy on his niece's face. Victoria nodded, stepping forward with Wade's hand firmly clasped in hers. "I have, Uncle. I'm going to marry Wade. I hope you can be happy for us." William studied them for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "When your Aunt Mary and I married, we'd known each other exactly 17 days, he revealed unexpectedly. "Her father thought we were rushing foolishly into something that wouldn't last. We had 32 wonderful years together before I lost her." He crossed to them, placing his good hand on their joined ones. "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants with a certainty that defies conventional timelines. I see that certainty in both your faces." Relief and gratitude washed over Victoria. "Then you give us your blessing." "With all my heart," William confirmed, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Though I must confess to some disappointment that Laramie will be losing an excellent teacher before we ever had her." Wade's arm encircled Victoria's waist. "Actually, sir, I've been thinking about that. The settlement nearby is growing fast, mostly families with young children. They've been talking about building a proper school, but they need a teacher. Someone with proper training from back east." Victoria looked up at him in surprise. "You never mentioned this." "Wanted to be sure of your feelings first," Wade explained. "Didn't want you to feel obligated to stay if your heart was set on Laramie." William chuckled. "Seems you've thought of everything, Blackburn." "Not quite everything," Wade admitted. "There's still a wedding to plan, a school to build, and a lifetime to spend making your niece as happy as she makes me." Victoria's heart swelled with love for this man who had once promised to keep her safe and had never wavered in that promise. "I think we can figure those things out together." "Together," Wade agreed, sealing the promise with a tender kiss that held all the hope and promise of their future. 6 months later, Victoria stood in Martha's bedroom, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror as the older woman made final adjustments to her wedding gown. The simple white dress with its lace collar and pearl buttons was far less elaborate than what she might have worn for a Boston wedding, but Victoria found it perfect for the woman she had become, practical yet feminine, elegant without ostentation. "You look beautiful, dear," Martha declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Wade won't know what hit him when he sees you walking down that aisle." Victoria smiled, smoothing her hands over the soft fabric. "It seems strange to be nervous. After everything we've been through together, a wedding ceremony should be the easy part." Martha chuckled, tucking a stray curl back into Victoria's upswept hairstyle. "Wedding day jitters are as natural as breathing, no matter the circumstances. But I've never seen two people more right for each other than you and Wade Blackburn." A knock at the door heralded the arrival of Victoria's uncle, resplendent in his best suit, his injured shoulder long healed. "It's time," he announced, his eyes widening appreciatively at the sight of his niece. "Victoria, you're a vision. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." Tears threatened at the mention of her parents, but Victoria blinked them away, determined not to ruin Martha's careful work with her cosmetics. "Thank you, Uncle. That means more than I can say." The small church in the nearby settlement was filled to capacity, with well-wishers ranch hands from the Double B, families from the growing community, Marshal Bennett and several of his deputies, and even some of William's colleagues who had traveled from Laramie for the occasion. Yellow and white wildflowers decorated every available surface, their sweet fragrance filling the air. At the altar, Wade waited with barely concealed impatience, handsomer than Victoria had ever seen him in a new black suit, his normally unruly hair tamed for the occasion. Beside him stood Frank, serving as best man, his weathered face split by an uncharacteristically broad smile. When the small church orchestra, 3 fiddlers and a pianist, began playing the wedding march, Victoria took a deep breath and placed her hand on her uncle's arm. This was the beginning of her new life with the man who had found her at her weakest moment and helped her discover her greatest strength. Wade's face as she walked toward him was everything Victoria could have hoped for: awe, adoration, and a love so deep it seemed to illuminate him from within. When William placed her hand in Wade's, the connection between them was so profound that the rest of the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in a perfect moment of communion. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. They had written their own vows, promises of love, support, and partnership that acknowledged both the extraordinary circumstances of their meeting and the ordinary challenges they would face together in the years to come. "I found you when you were facing your darkest hour," Wade said, his voice steady though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But you showed me what true courage looks like. You've brought light and purpose back into my life, Victoria. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings us, to be your partner in all things, and to love you more each day than I did the day before." Victoria's voice trembled slightly as she spoke her own vows. "You said I didn't have to stand, that I'd already survived, but the truth is that you gave me the strength to stand again, not just physically, but in every way that matters. I promise to walk beside you through all of life's joys and sorrows, to build our dreams together, and to love you completely and without reservation for all the days of our lives." When the pastor finally pronounced them husband and wife, Wade's kiss was both reverent and passionate, a perfect embodiment of the man himself and the love they shared. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and enough goodwill to warm the autumn air despite the encroaching chill of the Wyoming evening. Victoria found herself passed from dance partner to dance partner, her uncle, Marshall Bennett, young Elijah, now attending the school where Victoria taught 3 days each week, and countless others, but her eyes always sought and found Wade in the crowd, their gazes connecting with silent promises across the room. As the festivities wound down, Wade reclaimed his bride, leading her in a final dance as the musicians played a slow, sweet melody. "Happy Mrs. Blackburn," he murmured against her ear. "Completely," Victoria replied, nestling closer in his embrace. "Though I'm beginning to think it might be time for the bride and groom to make their escape." A slow smile spread across Wade's face. "I've been thinking the same thing for the past hour." They made their goodbyes amid good-natured teasing and heartfelt well-wishes, then rode together in the wagon Wade had decorated specially for the occasion back to the Double B, where the main house awaited them, their home now, truly and officially. Martha and the other ranch employees had tactfully arranged to stay in town for the night, leaving the newlyweds with perfect privacy for their first night as husband and wife. Wade lifted Victoria from the wagon with reverent hands, but instead of setting her down, he carried her across the threshold in the time-honored tradition. "Welcome home, Victoria Blackburn," he said softly, setting her gently on her feet in the entryway that was now illuminated by dozens of candles. Martha's romantic touch, no doubt. Victoria stood on tiptoe to kiss him, pouring all her love into the contact. "It feels right, doesn't it? Being here together, starting our life as husband and wife in the place where I first began to heal, to hope again." Wade's arms tightened around her. "Everything about us feels right, from that first moment in the wilderness to right now." Their coming together that night was both an affirmation of the love they had found in extraordinary circumstances and a promise of the ordinary, everyday love that would sustain them through the years to come. Every touch, every whispered endearment, every moment of passion was infused with the knowledge that they had found in each other something rare and precious, a love born of courage and compassion, tempered by shared danger, and now free to flourish in peace. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the large bed that was now theirs together, Wade traced gentle patterns on Victoria's bare shoulder, his expression thoughtful in the dying candlelight. "What are you thinking?" she asked, pressing a kiss to his chest, directly over his steadily beating heart. "That I'm the luckiest man in the Wyoming Territory," he replied, his fingers tangling in her hair, now loose around her shoulders. "That somehow I found the other half of my soul out there in the wilderness." Victoria smiled, remembering those first words he had spoken to her when she was too exhausted to stand. "You don't have to stand. You've already survived." "Little did I know then that you would help me stand stronger than ever," Wade murmured, pulling her closer. "That you would give me not just a reason to survive, but a reason to truly live." "We saved each other," Victoria observed softly, "and now we get to build something beautiful together." As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Victoria felt a profound sense of rightness of having found, against all odds, exactly where and with whom she belonged. The journey had been harrowing, the danger real, but the love that had blossomed amid adversity was stronger for having been forged in fire. In the years that followed, that strength would see them through all the challenges and joys of their shared life, the birth of their children, the growth of the Double B into one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory, The establishment of Victoria's School, which eventually grew into an academy with a reputation that drew students from as far as Denver. There were difficult times, of course, drought years that threatened the herd, a devastating fire that destroyed the original barn, illness and occasional injury that reminded them of life's fragility. But through it all, Wade and Victoria faced each challenge together, their love deepening with each passing season. And on quiet evenings, when they sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the land they both loved, they sometimes spoke of that first meeting of a woman too stubborn to surrender to despair, and a man who recognized in her a spirit that matched his own. You don't have to stand. You've already survived. Simple words that had marked the beginning of an extraordinary love story, one that proved that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in our darkest moments, and the strongest bonds are forged when we are at our most vulnerable. For Wade and Victoria Blackburn, that truth was the foundation of a lifetime of happiness, built day by day in the wild beauty of the Wyoming frontier, where they had found not just survival but each other.